I didn't come to Elmridge to find a story. I came to check a box. It was the spring of 1986, and I was 24, a second-year graduate student in behavioral therapy, doing my clinical rotation at a restorative residential home for adolescent girls tucked somewhere between two forgettable counties in southern Minnesota. Elmridge Restorative Home sounded innocuous on paper, a quiet retreat for troubled youth far from urban chaos, a place where silence was part of the healing process. At least, that's what the brochure said. My supervisor at the university, Dr. Havers, told me I was lucky. Elmridge was considered low risk. No violent cases, no court mandates, no screaming matches, just girls learning to regulate, to reflect, to quiet down. I didn't question it then. I just packed my overnight bag, drove 4 hours west, and checked in at the staff housing unit tucked behind the facility. From the outside, Elmridge was almost beautiful. 3 stories of pale stone and white trim ivy crawling across the east wing, a gravel driveway flanked by birch trees. The girls' quarters faced a small manicured courtyard with benches and a dry fountain. But the first thing I noticed even before I stepped out of my car was the quiet. No laughter, no music, no shouting between dorm windows, no sound at all. A woman in starched white met me at the front entrance. She looked like someone from a nursing textbook, pale skin, red hair, pinned into a perfect coil, crisp white shoes. Her name tag read S. Harrow. "Sylvia," she said, extending a hand. "You must be Marla Benton. Welcome to Elmridge." Behind her, another woman stood near the staircase, identical in every detail except her name tag read C. Harrow. "We're very pleased the university has sent someone with such a promising background," Celine said, her voice light and melodic. They spoke like they'd rehearsed it, in the exact same cadence, at the exact same pitch. It was unnerving. Inside, the air was cool and still. There was no music playing, no echo of footsteps on tile. Every piece of furniture looked placed with surgical precision, and on the wall near the intake desk was a framed quote in gold lettering: "Stillness is not absence. It is alignment." The Harrow Method. I was led to the intake records by a quiet staff member named Jeanette, who handed me a clipboard and gestured silently to the files. "We're proud of our consistency," Celine said behind me. "You'll find our records thorough and complete." But they weren't. The folders were neatly labeled by patient number, not by name. Each included a basic bio sheet, behavioral notes, and weekly reflection logs written in staff handwriting. The girls themselves weren't encouraged to journal. Sylvia said it encouraged internal noise. It was while flipping through patient number 31 and patient number 33 that I first noticed something missing. There was no patient number 32. The numbering jumped, as if someone had pulled the file or never made one to begin with. I asked Jeanette if it might have been misfiled. She smiled nervously. "Maybe it's in the archives. I can check." But the smile was strained, and when she turned to go, I heard Celine's voice drift from down the hall. "Not every vessel needs a number." That night in the dorm room, they gave me plain bed steel desk, no mirror. I couldn't stop thinking about that missing file. Patient number 32. No name, no chart, no notes. Just absence. But not the benign kind. This was a curated void. The next morning, I asked if I could observe a therapy session. Of course, Sylvia said, guiding me to the observation room. "We'll show you our reflection exercises. They're foundational." Through the one-way glass, I saw 7 girls seated in a semicircle, all facing forward, backs, straight, hands on knees. No one spoke. No one fidgeted. No one looked at anyone else. It was like watching statues breathe. Then at the far end of the room, I noticed her. A girl, maybe 12 or 13. Dark hair in a tight braid. Eyes fixed on the wall, completely still. I leaned closer. There was something about her posture, not forced, but trained, and then I saw it. On the desk in front of her, not a notebook like the others, but a drawing. A simple outline of a human mouth sewn shut with crude black lines. I turned to Jeanette. "Who's that girl?" She paused. "That's patient number 32. I blinked. "But her file, some cases aren't formalized," she said softly. "She's under advanced observation." The door behind us opened. Sylvia stepped in smiling. "Did you find the session informative?" I nodded slowly, but my stomach twisted. That girl had no file, no name, and she was drawing things no child should understand. I once read that twins who grow up too close begin to share a language all their own. But Sylvia and Celine Harrow didn't just share language. They shared intention. I watched them move through the halls of Elmridge like mirrored specters' white uniforms, always immaculate steps perfectly in sync. When one turned her head to speak, the other seemed to breathe in response. It wasn't affection. It was alignment. Too precise. Too studied. And the girls, they didn't flinch when the Harrow sisters approached. They didn't smile either. They just stilled, as if silence had mass and the twins carried it with them. During my second day, I was invited to a morning reflection briefing, an institutional term for what might have been a therapy session anywhere else. It was held in the West Room, a space flooded with pale light white walls and pale blue chairs arranged in a perfect half-circle. Sylvia began the session by lighting a candle. She didn't speak. Instead, she turned to the group of 8 girls seated before her and simply nodded. As if on cue, they all closed their eyes. No breathing exercises. No affirmations. Just stillness. After several minutes, Celine entered silently and handed each girl a folded square of parchment. One by one, they unfolded them. Not a single child reacted. No one read aloud. No one spoke. They simply stared at the paper until Sylvia collected them again. After the session, I approached Celine, trying to sound casual. What were those notes the girls were reading? She smiled serenely. Guiding statements. Each one unique to their current phase. And what phase would that be? Her smile didn't falter. We follow the Harrow Method. I believe you'll find our documentation enlightening. Later that day, Jeanette slipped me a slim binder titled Harrow Therapeutic Silence Protocol. Internal use only. I waited until lights out to read it in my room. The first page was a quote, "Speech is a crutch. Remove it, and the soul must learn to walk again." The binder outlined a tiered system of treatment, 5 stages each, marked by the progressive removal of language identity and independent expression. Phase 1, softening patients were discouraged from initiating speech. Positive reinforcement given for silence. Journaling replaced with quiet thought exercises. Phase 2, echo withdrawal. Mirrors removed. Names replaced with initials. Group activities forbidden. Eye contact discouraged. Phase 3, stillness practice, movement limited. Speech restricted to daily affirmations. Patients who resisted were placed under echo observation. Phase 4, reflection integration. Language. Use reduced to 1-syllable responses. Emotional expression monitored. Assigned silent partner appear already advanced. Phase 5, vessel induction. Identity relinquished. No communication permitted. Patients evaluated for interior quietude. Those selected moved to the listening wing. No explanations. No research references. No citations. Just doctrine. The Harrow sisters didn't run a treatment facility. They ran a philosophy. And they had built it out of children who had once screamed and laughed and cried but no longer remembered how. That night, I dreamed of a girl drawing a mouth stitched shut, of Sylvia watching without blinking, of Celine walking into a room full of silence and calling it progress. The next morning, I woke to find something slid under my door, a folded scrap of paper torn at the edges smudged in pencil. Just one sentence written in a child's shaky hand. They say if I forget my name, I'll stop hurting. No name, no signature, just that sentence. I kept it in my pocket all day, and I stopped believing this place was helping anyone. I began to notice the hands first. Small hands. Girls' hands. Always tucked neatly on laps or gripping the arms of chairs. But when they thought no one was looking, those hands moved. One morning, during the garden break, I saw a girl no older than 10. Auburn hair, soft freckles assigned, name. Patient 18 crouched by the hedge with a stick in her hand. She wasn't playing. She was writing, into the dirt. I stepped closer, 4 letters, C-A-L-L. But before she could finish, a shadow fell across the soil. Sylvia stood behind us, arms folded. Patient 18. She said softly, "Reflection hour begins in 2 minutes. Prepare." The girl dropped the stick. Didn't speak. She brushed the dirt over the letters with her foot and stood up, and then she walked away. I waited until the yard was empty, then dropped to my knees and brushed the dirt gently aside. Callie. That name. That was the name I'd seen on the back of a group photo in the archives, taken a year prior labeled with names under each child. There had been a Callie, and I remembered her smile, but Callie wasn't listed in the current patient roster. She wasn't in the files, and patient 18 never wrote in the dirt again. That same afternoon, I asked Jeanette directly what happened to the girl named Callie. She blinked. "We don't use personal names here." "But you used to." I saw her name in an old photo. Jeanette cut me off gently. "Some patients resist the method. If they don't adapt, they're reassigned." "Reassigned where?" She paused. "To the quiet wing." I had never heard of such a place. It wasn't on the official map of the facility. When I asked for more details, she simply said, "Only those who complete Phase 4 are permitted there." That night, I found patient 18 in the hallway near the east stairwell. She was alone facing the wall. I approached, slowly, crouched to her level and whispered, "Is your name Callie?" She flinched. Her hands clenched, but she didn't respond. I tried again. "Do you remember it?" Still nothing. Then, slowly, she held up her left arm, and written there in faint blue ink, almost faded under her sleeve, was one phrase, "Not my name." I barely slept, because I understood what they were doing now. This wasn't therapy. This wasn't rehabilitation. It was a methodical dismantling of self. First the speech, then the names, then the memories that held it all together. The next day, Callie was gone. When I asked, Jeanette only said, "She has progressed." But her eyes didn't match her voice. I checked the log. Patient 18 had been marked transitioned. No room number assigned, no schedule, no next session. Just a note in red pen. Begin observation phase. Listening only. Whatever that meant, it didn't sound like healing. The next time I saw her, she was sitting alone in the East reflection room. Patient number 32. The girl with no file, no voice, no name. She didn't look up when I entered. The room was near empty, pale blue walls, a window without glass. Only a screen and a single desk where she sat hunched over a sheet of cream-colored paper. No crayons, no color, just a dull graphite pencil in her hand, moving with eerie precision. Jeanette, who had quietly let me in, whispered, "Art expression is part of her quiet integration phase. We don't prompt. We just observe." She left me alone after that. I stood at the far side of the room watching. No one had officially assigned me to patient 32, but she seemed to find me anyway. Her drawing was slow, deliberate, not the kind of chaos or scribble you'd expect from a child in distress. No, her lines were clean, controlled, too controlled. When she was done, she slid the paper slightly forward as if placing it on display. I waited. When I finally crossed the room and glanced down, my breath caught. A face. No eyes. No nose. Just a mouth grotesquely wide, sewn shut with heavy black X's. And beneath it, she had drawn a symbol. A circle split by two vertical lines like pillars in a gate, or bars on a cage. I'd seen that symbol before. It was embroidered subtly, almost invisibly at the bottom hem of the Harrow sisters' uniforms. White thread on white fabric. Easy to miss unless you were looking for it. And now it was here, drawn in careful childlike pencil, beneath an image that screamed what no voice could say. I knelt beside her. Do you remember your name? Her eyes shifted. Barely. I whispered, Callie. A flicker. Then her lips parted. Not to speak, but to draw in a trembling breath. Like the word almost formed, but something deeper, stronger, crushed it. A sound outside the room made us both jump, the distinct soft squeak of white rubber soles on tile. The door opened. Sylvia stood there. Ah, patient 32 prefers her solitude, she said gently, voice warm but final. I stood slowly. She showed me her drawing. Sylvia didn't glance at it. Art is transient, like noise. It passes through us and dissolves. She stepped forward and picked up the drawing without looking at it, folded it once, then again, slid it into her coat pocket. Reflection hour is ending. I left the room, but something inside me stayed. That night in my dorm, I drew the symbol from memory in my notebook. A circle, two vertical lines, the mark of silence, and beneath it I wrote, what they silence, they shape. I didn't know then how many times I'd see that symbol again. Etched on door frames, carved into chairs, scribbled faintly behind picture frames. It was everywhere, a quiet language beneath the surface of Elmridge. And the girls, they weren't just forgetting their names. They were being taught to fear having one. There was no good reason to be in that hallway. Technically, it wasn't even a hallway, just a narrow pass-through behind the laundry chute used by maintenance staff, and according to Jeanette, not on the official floor plan. But that was exactly why I went there. Something about Elmridge's layout never made sense to me. There were echoes where there shouldn't have been. Long delays between footsteps and their return. I'd started mapping the building in my notebook, drawing rough lines for every corridor, every therapy room, every exit. It helped me think, but there was a gap, a space between the east wing and the old pantry that no door seemed to access. Until I found it. Tucked behind an unused linen shelf past the industrial washer was a door with no label. Metal, slightly discolored near the bottom as if someone had scrubbed it too often, the kind of door that didn't want to be remembered. I pressed my ear against it. Silence, but not the kind I'd grown used to at Elmridge. This was dense, pressurized, like whatever was behind it had been tightly sealed for too long. The handle gave way with a soft click. Inside, the smell hit first bleach copper, and something faintly sweet like rotting fruit beneath antiseptic. A long, narrow room. No windows. White tile walls. Overhead fluorescents buzzing softly. In the center, a chair. Not a therapy chair. A restraint chair, metal cuffs on the arms and footrests. Padded, but only barely. Along the wall, a whiteboard smudged in red marker. At first I thought it was just notes or shift instructions, but as I stepped closer I read the words written across the top. Silence is discipline made holy. Beneath that, a list of initials. PR, 3 sessions. Response minimal. CM, 5 sessions. Transitioned. KS, 4 sessions. Rejected sound test and underlined twice in black, number 32, 7 sessions. Passive compliance. Proceed with Phase 5. My breath caught. I'd only just begun to grasp what the phases meant, but I knew enough to be afraid. There was a cabinet in the far corner, unlocked. Inside, headphones labeled Resonance, a reel-to-reel tape player. Dozens of tapes hand-labeled with numbers and strange abbreviations. A folded robe the color of ash stitched with the symbol circle. 2 vertical lines. On instinct, I grabbed the first tape and loaded it into the player. A hiss of static, then a voice. Female, soft, barely above a whisper. You are not your voice. You are not your name. You are not your memories. Let go, let go, let go. Repeated over and over. No inflection. No change in tone. I shut it off. When I turned, Sylvia was standing in the doorway. She didn't look surprised. Her hands were folded neatly in front of her and her voice was calm. Some of the rooms are reserved for advanced work, she said. I didn't speak. She stepped inside, took the tape from the machine and slid it back into the cabinet, then closed it gently. Elmridge is not a place for broken girls, she continued. It's a place for removing what broke them. I found my voice. And who decides what to remove? Her smile didn't reach her eyes. We don't remove, we unbind. She walked past me, then leaving the door open behind her. I stood there for another full minute, heart-pounding, ears ringing, trying to understand how I hadn't seen it sooner. Elmridge didn't treat trauma. It redefined it. Silence wasn't just a goal here. It was sacred. It started with a photograph. A black and white group shot I'd found by accident tucked behind a row of old training manuals in the intake office, 10 girls seated on a bench in the courtyard, 2 standing behind them. Sylvia and Celine. The girls looked different. They smiled. Some leaned into one another. One girl even stuck her tongue out mid-laugh. It didn't match anything I'd seen at Elmridge so far, but it was the names on the back that held me. Someone had handwritten them. First names only in faded blue ink. Sarah, Leah, Jolene, Hannah, and Callie, 4th from the left. A girl with bright eyes and uneven bangs. She looked familiar. I flipped through the current patient list. No Callie. Not under that name, not under any patient number. When I asked Jeanette, she stiffened. We don't refer to past residents without formal context. She was here, though. You knew her. Jeanette gave a tight smile. Some girls don't stay long enough to transition. I lowered my voice. What happens to them? A pause, then a whisper, barely audible. Those who resist become the quiet ones. I blinked. The what? But Jeanette had already walked away. That phrase haunted me all day. The quiet ones. It sounded like myth, the kind of thing whispered between bunk beds at night. But here in Elmridge, I suspected it was something much worse. That evening, I returned to the file room. The drawer, labeled Archived Transfers. 1985 should have contained her paperwork. I searched through it 3 times. Nothing. No intake file, no exit record, no mention of Callie at all. Just a numbered sequence that skipped 27, 28, 30. No 29. I pulled the logbook and found an entry marked P29 with a single phrase next to it, redirected to listening phase. No further tracking required. The same phrase that had appeared next to patient teen's name. I stared at it until the words lost meaning. redirected. That wasn't a transfer. That was a burial, a quiet one. That night I asked Celine directly. We were walking the perimeter of the courtyard under moonlight, a routine she insisted helped her listen to the rhythm of the house. I waited until we passed the fountain before speaking. There was a girl named Callie. Here wasn't there. She didn't stop walking. "You've seen a photograph," she said softly. "That moment is gone, but she's not. Where is she now?" Celine looked at me, then her face calm, impassive. "Some girls carry too much of their name with them. We offer them rest, not memory." "Rest," I said, voice cracking. She tilted her head. "You're asking the wrong questions, Marla. Don't ask where they are. Ask who they were before they hurt." I wanted to scream. Instead, I whispered, "I think they were girls who needed someone to protect them." She smiled. "And we do. We protect them from themselves." She turned and walked back toward the east wing, her white shoes silent on the gravel. I stood there alone, the sound of wind in the birches above me, and wondered how many girls had disappeared behind that same calm smile. Not taken by violence, but dissolved by doctrine. Callie had been erased, and the others, the quiet ones, were what remained when erasure was complete. The first thing I noticed was the silence of the mirrors. There were no frames, no stands, no vanity lights, just slabs of mirrored glass bolted directly to the walls in a white room that smelled faintly of vinegar and cold metal. 12 girls sat in folding chairs, each positioned precisely 3 feet from their assigned reflection. No movement, no speaking, no sound except the faint ticking of a wall-mounted metronome. I'd been invited, welcomed in Sylvia's words, to observe what they called mirror reflection therapy. But it was nothing like therapy. It was more like penance. Sylvia stood at the front of the room, clipboard in hand, while Celine paced the perimeter. Her footsteps measured her gaze, never resting. Each girl was given a slip of paper before entering. They weren't allowed to read it aloud. They simply unfolded it, read silently, then placed it face down on their knees. I couldn't see what they said, but I saw the effect. One girl blinked rapidly, trying to fight tears. Another bit her lip until it bled. A third sat rigid, shoulders trembling. Celine stopped behind her and whispered something I couldn't hear. The girl froze completely. That was when Sylvia finally spoke, not to the girls, but to me. "We begin with the face," she said softly. "It's the last place we hide what we refuse to forget." I glanced around the room again. The mirrors reflected not just the girls, but the undoing of them. Every twitch, every flicker of emotion was treated like infection. Their reflections weren't theirs anymore. They were being trained to fear what looked back. Sylvia continued. "The protocol is simple. Stillness earns rest. Reaction earns repetition." "And if a child breaks down?" I asked. Celine answered from across the room. "Then she's not ready to progress." I watched as one girl, tiny, maybe 8, shifted in her seat. Her chin trembled. She looked at herself and mouthed something silently. Sylvia stepped forward. "That one," she said to Celine. "She's not contained yet." Celine nodded. "Begin extension." She pulled a cloth from the supply bin, a gray fabric hood. I stepped forward. "What are you doing?" Sylvia smiled, helping her succeed. The cloth was placed gently but firmly over the child's head. The mirror was turned to face the wall. The chair was removed. The girl was now a shape without a face, a presence without reflection. Sylvia turned to me. "Emotion must be exorcised from the face first. The mouth follows." I left the room before it ended. Back in my dorm, I sat staring at my notebook, hands shaking. I drew what I'd seen: the room, the chairs, the mirror, placements, the hood. Then in the corner, I sketched the girl's silhouette. And next to her, I wrote, "She was punished for being seen by herself." The next morning, her chair was empty. I asked Jeanette about her. She hesitated, then whispered, "She's resting now." The mirrors showed she wasn't ready to speak. I didn't say it aloud, but in my head I thought she wasn't trying to speak. She was trying not to forget. She waited until the hallway was clear. I had just finished supervising afternoon courtyard duty, which meant standing beneath a leafless ash tree while the girls sat motionless on benches reading blank notebooks or watching the wind in silence. As the last of them filed back inside, one girl lingered. She had the kind of look Elmridge tried to erase mischief behind the eyes, something quick and too alive. She never spoke. I wasn't sure she could, but she watched everything. As she passed me, she didn't stop, didn't make eye contact. She just let something fall from her hand into mine fast and quiet. A folded paper square, thumb smudged, edges torn. I slipped it into my coat before anyone noticed. Back in my dorm room, I locked the door and unfolded it carefully. The handwriting was rushed letters tilted hard to the right, pressed deep into the paper. I remember my sister. I remember her voice. They say remembering is resistance. I think they're right. No name. But beneath the last line, someone had drawn a small figure, a girl with a braid, mouth open. Sound lines coming out in shaky waves. It wasn't a confession, it was a cry. I pressed the paper flat into my notebook, heart pounding. Someone in Elmridge still knew, still fought, still remembered. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed listening for the sound of footsteps that never came, trying to imagine what it took for a child to write those words in a place like this. The next morning, I looked for her. The girl with the spark. She wasn't at breakfast, not at courtyard duty, not in reflection room A or in group silence. I asked Jeanette. She shook her head. That patient has transitioned to a rest phase, I pressed. Where? She didn't answer. Instead, she changed the subject. Miss Harrow would like to see you in the East Study. I went. Sylvia stood by the window watching the courtyard like it was hers. She didn't turn around when she spoke. You've been very attentive, Marla. Your notes. Your presence, it's felt. I said nothing. She turned then, and in her hand was the paper. The paper. My stomach dropped. I'm not upset, she said gently. Curiosity is natural in your position. But curiosity without containment becomes noise. She walked toward the fireplace. The hearth was cold, unused. She lit a single match. The flame danced small and gold. Then she dropped the paper in. I stepped forward. Wait. But it was already curling into ash. Sylvia looked at me, eyes calm. We believe in helping the girls forget what harms them, she said. Sometimes that includes memories they think are love. I left the study shaking. Back in my room, I opened my notebook where the original letter had been pressed. But it was gone. In its place was a blank sheet. Someone had been in my room, not just reading, erasing. That night, as I turned off the lamp, I noticed something on my pillow. A single braid of dark brown hair, tied with a red thread. No note, no explanation. Just that. And in the silence that followed, I realized something had shifted. I wasn't just observing Elmridge anymore. Elmridge was watching me. It took 3 stolen keys and 1 lie about a misplaced clipboard to get into the archival basement. Elmridge's record room wasn't on the official schematics. You wouldn't find it on a map or marked by any sign. But I'd watched Jeanette descend those back stairs twice, always alone, always carrying nothing up but silence. The door was locked by 2 deadbolts. Old metal. No cameras. Just a heavy hush like the kind you find in places that weren't meant to be opened again. Inside shelves, wall to wall, floor to ceiling. Everything labeled in tidy block letters color-coded by decade. 1979, 1981, 1982, 1983, 1984, intake hold. And then tucked into the far corner, a single rusting drawer labeled only 0, no prefix, no dates, just 0. I pulled it open. Inside was one thin file, unlabeled on the outside. No patient number, no photo, just a name handwritten at the top of the intake form, Darla. May. I read it twice, then again. Something felt wrong. Familiar. The intake notes were brief, disturbingly so, admitted under emergency guardianship. No known family. Initial behavioral assessment, withdrawn nonverbal tendencies, response delay. Recommended for silencing, trial phase 1. There was a handwriting sample, a drawing, a mouth, stitched shut. The same one patient 32 had drawn. The next page listed a brief progress log. Session 1, no verbal reaction. Session 2, mild distress redirected. Session 3, eye contact broken. Session 4, passive compliance achieved. Note, initiate phase 3. Erase identifier. Transfer to numeric tracking. That's where her name ended. From that point forward, she was simply 0, no more personal entries. No family notes, no signatures. Just evaluation signed SH or CH. Sylvia. Celine. The final page stopped me cold. A page from a therapy log dated June 4, 1982, 4 years prior. A brief entry patient showed prolonged fixation on name when prompted. Drew own name backward. Erase reinforcement applied. No response to spoken word. Assigned new designation 32. I stood there, heart hammering. Darla May was patient 32. And she hadn't just lost her voice. She'd lost herself. By design. The Harrow sisters didn't fail to treat her. They succeeded in erasing her. I tucked the file into my coat fingers numb. As I turned to leave, something caught my eye on the back wall. A faded symbol etched into the plaster behind a shelf. A circle. 2 vertical lines. Next to it, a word carved faintly beneath layers of paint. Quiet. No slogans, no promises. Just that one word. And somehow it felt like a grave marker. They told me it was part of the original construction. An unused wing, Sylvia had said once when I asked about the double doors at the end of the East Hall. It's been repurposed for specialized observation. No one ever went in. Not the regular staff. Not Jeanette. Not even the cleaning crew. Until one morning, Sylvia appeared beside me at breakfast with her usual porcelain smile and said, "We think you're ready to see the progress we've made." She led me down the East Hall. No conversation, no explanation. Just the soft echo of our steps and the slow build of cold air, as if the walls themselves had forgotten warmth. The double doors were thick, steel-lined. A keypad lock buzzed softly as Sylvia keyed in the code. When the door swung open, I understood why they called it the soundproof wing. It was not just quiet, it was vacuumed, every surface padded, no windows, no vents. Even the lights were diffused to avoid hum. Inside, a line of girls stood against the far wall, identical gray garments, heads shaved to the scalp. No shoes, no facial expressions. They didn't look at us. They didn't look at anything. Each stood with arms at their sides facing forward, not like soldiers, but like statues awaiting instruction. I stepped closer. There were 7 girls. Then I saw the 8th. She wasn't in line. She stood in the center of the hallway alone, slightly apart, different. Her eyes were open but unfocused, her skin pale beneath the fluorescent light. There was a symbol stitched directly onto her garment, the same circle, and two vertical lines I'd seen again and again. Sylvia nodded toward her. "She's our first vessel," she said. I stared at the girl. She couldn't have been older than 12, but there was no child left in her. Her face was unnervingly still, not blank, not dazed. Intentional, like everything inside her had been sealed behind a locked door. I whispered, "Does she speak?" "No," Sylvia replied. "Not in years. She doesn't need to. What does she do?" "She listens." To what Sylvia turned to me expression unreadable. To the ones who still resist. A wave of nausea hit me. I tried to look away, but the girl the vessel turned her head just slightly toward me and blinked once, twice, then still. The others didn't move. Celine's voice came from behind us. I hadn't heard her enter. She was born here, you know. I turned, born. Celine nodded, a daughter of the Method, a life untouched by chaos. I didn't know what that meant, not then, not fully. But in that hallway surrounded by girls who had been emptied of sound, of expression of self, I felt it. This wasn't rehabilitation. This was ritual. The vessel wasn't a child anymore. She was a doctrine made flesh, and I realized something far more terrifying than any silence I had known. She wasn't watching me. She was remembering me. The notebook was thinner than I expected. Bound in black leather, the edges frayed from use, the initials CH pressed faintly into the cover. I found it wedged behind the filing cabinet in the administrative office, left open just long enough for me to slide it into my coat sleeve when no one was watching. Back in my dorm room with the door locked and the curtains drawn, I opened it with shaking hands. Every page was handwritten in fine, slanted script, deliberate, measured, detached. It wasn't a diary, it was a manual. At the top of the first page, a phrase in all caps: "The Doctrine of Unvoicing." Below it, a list 4 phases underlined in red mute mirror memory. Merge. I read them over and over, each word, anchoring something darker than the last. Phase 1. Mute. Remove stimuli. Discourage eye contact. Forbid spontaneous speech. Begin substitution of responses with silence or gesture. Noise is residue of disorder. Remove it, and the soul must reorganize. Phase 2. Mirror. Introduce the child to reflection sessions. Condition facial stillness. Reinforce neutral affect. Introduce symbolic objects, e.g., gray garments, blank pages. Begin transition from name to numerical designation. The face must forget its story to be rewritten. Phase 3. Memory. Erasure reinforcement applied. Restrict use of prior identifiers. Reframe past experiences as interference. Assign a vessel to mirror behavior and suppress relapse. Memories are roots. To make them float, we must cut them loose. Phase 4. Merge, full unvoicing. Complete surrender of internal monologue. No more journaling, no more listening to self. Patient observed for signs of clean channel, a mind no longer echoing. Only in total silence can the self dissolve. I kept reading. Celine had written about each girl in terms not of treatment, but of progression, as if she were tending a garden of silence. Words like stillness response, non-reflexive posture, and name erosion. Successful filled the margins. But the most chilling section was under a heading titled Vessel Preparation. It listed criteria. Age of entry, 7 to 11. Minimal prior attachment. High emotional sensitivity. Demonstrated withdrawal response to mirror conditioning. resistance to verbal reintroduction. Then one final line written alone. She must not remember her own voice. At the bottom of the page was a drawing, hand-sketched, of the symbol I'd seen again and again. A circle. 2 vertical lines. Only this time it had a name beneath it. Seal of listening. And a note. When she bears the seal, the others will follow. I closed the notebook and stared at the wall for a long time. This wasn't a treatment center. It was a conversion site. Not religious, not spiritual. Something colder. Engineered. A place where girls weren't healed, they were hollowed. They called it the whisper test. It wasn't listed on the official activity calendar. It didn't appear in any intake forms or therapy logs. But the girls knew. You could see it in the way they tensed when their names were called for sensory evaluation, in the way their shoulders drew inward like they already knew what was coming. Jeanette let it slip by accident. It's meant to verify the threshold of unvoicing she'd said, eyes darting toward the hallway. It helps identify who's still clinging. I asked to observe. She didn't say yes, but she didn't say no either. So I followed the group as they were quietly escorted down the North Service corridor, not the usual therapy wing, but past the storage units and beneath the west stairwell. The door wasn't marked. Inside, a narrow hallway lined with 5 small rooms, each about the size of a confession booth. Padded walls, no windows, 1 speaker, 1 stool, a single switch on the outside labeled playback. Celine greeted me at the far end, smiling as though we were meeting for tea. You're just in time. We've calibrated a new emotional frequency loop. The older recordings are too distinct. Recordings of what? She tilted her head. Familiarity, affection, identity. Before I could ask more, the first girl entered. Maybe 10. Hair cropped short. She didn't look at anyone. She sat on the stool, hands in lap, back straight. Celine closed the door behind her, then pressed playback. Through a hidden intercom, I heard it too. A voice, soft, older. A woman's voice, slowed, slightly stretched like warm taffy. You're my brave little star, aren't you? You used to sing that song about the moon. Do you remember the one pause, then humming? Off-key. Familiar. The girl's breath hitched. I saw it, just barely. A flicker in the throat, a ripple in the hands. Celine leaned towards the glass. She's remembering. Isn't that good, I asked. Celine didn't blink. No, it's disruptive. The recording ended. The girl didn't cry, she didn't speak, but she wiped her palms against her thighs in a single nervous stroke. Celine marked something on her clipboard. Emotive residue detected. Regression probable. Reevaluate in 48 hours. Another girl went in, and another. Different voices each time. Mothers, fathers, sisters. Slowed, stretched, stripped of natural tone, familiarity distorted into ritual. Most girls didn't react at all. But one, a girl with a scar along her jawline, whispered something. The glass was too thick to hear. Celine opened the door mid-sentence. No, she said, gently stepping inside. We don't bring ghosts into the room. The girl looked up. Her eyes were red. Celine reached down and placed her hand on the girl's head. Let it fade, she said softly. You're almost clean. The girl was escorted out. I turned away, heart pounding. This is psychological cruelty. Sylvia appeared behind me, quiet as a shadow. She placed her hand gently on my shoulder. You're too loud inside, dear. I stiffened. Excuse me. Her grip didn't tighten, but it didn't move. You carry too much noise. The girls can feel it. It bleeds into the room. She leaned closer. I could smell lavender and bleach. "It's not just what we silence," she whispered. "It's what we unteach." I broke away and left. Back in my dorm, I wrote just one line in my notebook over and over until the ink bled through the page. They call it therapy, but it's an exorcism. They told me it was a storage closet, a utility room. No need to worry about that wing, Jeanette had said, eyes carefully fixed on her clipboard. But room 5 wasn't a closet. It was colder, quieter, deliberate. They brought me there after the whisper test. I'd been asking too many questions, too openly, about too many girls who no longer had files or names, or, God forbid, voices. Sylvia appeared at my door that evening, calm as ever. "You've been invited to a special observation," she said. "One we usually reserve for our most reflective interns." Her words were soft, but her eyes gleamed. I followed her through a hallway I'd never been down before, narrow, low-ceilinged, lined with old green tile, the kind that used to be white. At the end, a single black door, room V. It wasn't locked, because it didn't have to be. Inside, no lights, no furniture, just mirrors, dozens of them, some standing, some nailed to the walls. Others cracked their silver backing peeling at the corners, and in the center a girl, barefoot. Gray gown, head bowed. She didn't react to our presence. Sylvia gestured for me to step in. I did. The air was wrong. Not stale, not musty. Just thin, like breath didn't belong here. The girl slowly lifted her head. Her eyes met mine, and then she whispered, barely audible but clear, "We all remember." Just not out loud. I froze. Sylvia didn't move. The girl stepped forward and reached into the folds of her gown. From beneath the hem, she pulled something, a bundle of paper scraps torn from old notebooks, book margins, even tissue, taped and glued together into a jagged chain. She handed it to me. On each scrap, one word, shaky handwriting, faded pencil, but clear. We had names. I held it like it was glass. Then she stepped back into the shadows between the mirrors, and her reflection dissolved into dozens of silent duplicates, each one not looking at me but through me. I turned to Sylvia. She simply smiled. Room 5 is for voluntary silence, a place to practice stillness without structure. They choose to come here. The girl blinked once, slowly, then turned her back to us. I left without speaking. Back in my dorm, I laid the paper chain out on my desk and read the words again. We had names. It wasn't a protest. It was a memorial. That night, I dreamed of mirrors, endless edge to edge. Each one held a child. Each child had no mouth, only eyes, and they were looking at me. The storm hit just after midnight. A surge snapped the power, plunging Elmridge into unnatural silence, not the cultivated kind Sylvia and Celine adored, but a raw, unsettled quiet. The kind that made old buildings creak and made the wind sound like it was whispering someone's name. The emergency lights flickered on, dim, red. I didn't wait. I took the flashlight I had hidden in the false bottom of my drawer, pulled on a sweater, and left my room barefoot. The floors were slick with humidity. The hallway seemed longer than usual. Or maybe I was finally noticing how the darkness made it stretch. Down the servants' stairwell, past the laundry chute. Through the maintenance passage I'd seen once but was told led to sealed archives. It didn't. At the end of that hallway was a door with no knob, only a rusted latch. It opened without resistance. The air hit me like a wall, damp, metallic, heavy with the scent of bleach and something beneath it. Something organic. The flashlight beam trembled in my hand as I stepped inside. Stone walls. No insulation. No color. just a row of beds, 6 in total. 5 were empty. The 6th held a girl. She was small, pale, hooked to no machines, though the indentations in the mattress suggested she once had been. Her hair had grown back unevenly in patches. Her skin was mottled, not bruised, but disused. She wasn't asleep. She was absent. One hand lay curled at her side, grasping a piece of cloth. I leaned in. It was a fragment of a pillowcase frayed at the edges, embroidered crudely with red thread. One word, Sarah. I staggered back. Patient 0. She wasn't just the first, she was the proof. The one they couldn't perfect, so they hid her. Her chest rose and fell, shallow but steady. I whispered her name softly, gently. Sarah. Her fingers twitched. A sound escaped her lips, not a word. Not even a hum. Just breath with intent. She was still in there, buried but not erased. Behind me, I heard the click of a door. I turned, heart-pounding flashlight beam shaking. But no one came. No voice called out. I lifted Sarah so light it didn't feel like lifting a child, wrapped her in my coat, and carried her back through the passage, step by silent step, up the servants' stairs and out the side emergency door I'd already unlocked the day before. We didn't go to the road. We went through the trees. Branches clawed my arms. Mud sucked at my feet. But we made it. 3 miles to the nearest gas station where the lights burned hot and humming. I collapsed onto the floor and told the attendant to call the state emergency line. I'm with the Elmridge program, I said. I have a girl. She needs help. Her name is Sarah. They didn't ask how I knew. They just sent a van. 2 hours later, Sarah was safe. Warm. Breathing. And the only girl who had ever left Elmridge with her name. I didn't sleep after that. Not after carrying a half-conscious child through the woods. Not after seeing the embroidery on that cloth red thread, uneven stitching her name clinging to the fibers like a final breath. Sarah. The last girl they couldn't erase. I spent the next 48 hours compiling everything photographs I had taken in secret pages I'd copied from Celine's notebook. The chain of paper scraps that spelled, "We had names." A voice recording I made during the whisper test, and the full transcript of File 0. I didn't go through the official state system. I knew better by then. I uploaded everything to the encrypted portal provided to field psychologists under whistleblower protection. Then I made copies. I sent one to an investigative reporter in St. Paul, another to the Office of Child Protection, and a third to myself, scheduled to release publicly if I failed to check in within 72 hours. For the first time since arriving at Elmridge, I felt something crack open. Not fear, not hope. Resolve. By the afternoon, 2 unmarked state vehicles arrived. A social worker stepped out, then 2 officers. I rode in silence with them back to the gates of Elmridge gravel crunching beneath the tires like bones. But the house wasn't waiting. It was empty. The windows were shuttered, the lights off, the front door padlocked from the inside. No movement, no girls. Only one thing remained. A wooden plaque nailed to the interior foyer wall visible through the cracked glass. On it, carved deep and dark, was the symbol. A circle, 2 vertical lines, and beneath it, in block lettering, "We do not answer to the world." The world answers to silence. They were gone, vanished, evacuated, dissolved, no forwarding address, no transfer orders, no legal trail. The girls had disappeared again. Only this time, so had the keepers. I wasn't shocked, I was furious. But then, the world started to listen. It began with a thread on a psychology forum. Then a repost. Then a local paper picked up the story. The symbol, the circle and bars started showing up in hashtags on message boards and comment sections asking, "What is the Harrow Method? Where are the Elmridge girls? What happened to their voices? And then the first survivor came forward. She didn't call herself a victim, she called herself Patient 4. But then she paused and said no. My name is Leah. She described the silence exercise as the mirror protocol, the whisper test. She remembered Sarah. She remembered Callie. She remembered everything. Then another girl came forward. Then another. Some had changed their names. Some still couldn't speak above a whisper. One had become a therapist. Another worked at a library in Michigan. But their stories echoed. They called it therapy. But it was disappearance. They didn't want us quiet. They wanted us gone. A class action suit was filed. An investigation opened. A statewide policy rewritten to include coercive silence as emotional endangerment. The Harrow Method was denounced, its authors never found. 5 years later, I returned to what was left of Elmridge. The gates hung crooked. Vines consumed the stone. Windows shattered by time, not force. The house sagged inward like something exhaling for the last time. I didn't go to the basement. I didn't go to room 5. I went instead to a hallway I'd once walked every morning just past the east staircase. The door at the end had been locked for years. This time it opened. Inside a square room. No furniture. No lights. No paint. Just walls covered from floor to ceiling in scratches. Names, first names, middle names, nicknames. Words etched by fingernail pencil, maybe even blood. And in the center of the wall, drawn in red chalk, a circle, 2 vertical lines. And surrounding it, one phrase repeated again and again, I am not a vessel. I am a girl. I didn't cry. I didn't pray. I just whispered back into that long-forgotten room, I hear you. Then I stepped outside, and as I closed the door behind me, the wind caught through the broken rafters above, and for just 1 second, it almost sounded like laughter.